Hello everyone, welcome back to the online conference, The Future of Responsible Brain Research of the Human Brain Project. We hope that you had a good break. Now, to those of you who are just joining us, I would like to make you aware that we are recording, so both audio and video from the session, and the videos will be available afterwards on the YouTube channel of the Human Brain Project and also social media channels of other partners within the Human Brain Project. So just so you're aware of that. The event today is hosted by the Responsible Research and Innovation Group of the Human Brain Project. I'm Lise Bitz, lead of the work on responsible research and innovation in the Human Brain Project, and the event today is co-hosted together with my Human Brain Project colleagues, Inga Ulnik, Sane and Katinka Evers from the Montfort and Uppsala universities. Now I'm very excited to welcome you to the keynote talk of today, and to help us with moderating the keynote session, we have also a Human Brain Project colleague with us, Aline Salas. And so Aline, please take over and introduce our speaker and the session and yourself.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I am the Deputy Lead of Responsible Research and Innovation in the Human Brain Project. I am also the lead of the task Neuroethics and Engagement. And it is my great pleasure, I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Marcello Ienca is the Chair of Ethics of Artificial Intelligence and Neuroscience at the School of Medicine, Technical University of Munich in Germany, and the Senior Research Fellow at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. As the head of the Intelligent Systems Ethics Group, he and his team conduct interdisciplinary research on socially disruptive technologies such as artificial intelligence, neurotechnology, biomedical engineering, and big data. Marcello is an appointed member of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that is the OECD, the steering group of neurotechnology, and furthermore, he has written reports or served as an appointed expert advisor for the United Nations, UNESCO, the Council of Europe, the EU Parliament, and the US National Academy of Sciences. So today, Marcello is going to be talking about AI and neuroscience. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Arlene, for this very kind introduction. And also thank you to the entire Responsible Research and Innovation team for inviting me. It's a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to present today some reflections around the topics of neuroscience and artificial intelligence, and explore together the common ethical background of these two disciplines. So please tell me if my slides are visible.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so here's a brief overview of my presentation. I will first start by talking about the common scientific ground of neuroscience and artificial intelligence. I will then talk about the use of artificial intelligence in neuroscience and the concurrent use of neuroscience in artificial intelligence. And then I will try to make a case for why we need a common ethical framework for neuroscience and AI. And I will conclude with some reflections on normative ethics in this context, and also current regulatory initiatives at the interplay between neuroscience and artificial intelligence. So let me start with the common scientific ground. Let's start from the definition of concepts, because as many people in the audience know, artificial intelligence is a very vaguely defined field of research. So just to make it clear, what I will refer to as AI today in my presentation is the study and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that are normally believed to require human intelligence. And if we look at the terminology that is commonly used in AI research, we can clearly see that this terminology and vocabulary is almost entirely imported from psychology and neuroscience. So there is a very strong terminological overlap between the categories that are commonly used in neuroscience and the categories that are commonly used in artificial intelligence. And this overlap of terminologies is not purely random. It actually has historical reasons. In fact, both modern cognitive neuroscience and artificial intelligence have a common origin, which can be traced back to what historians of science tend to refer to as the cognitive revolution, namely the birth of the cognitive sciences, which occurred in the 1950s and 1960s. Mostly triggered by people such as Marvin Minsky, Alan Newell, Herbert Simon, Claude Shannon, and many other people who gathered around Dartmouth College in the summer of 1956. And what the research line of all this very heterogeneous spectrum of scientists was basically highlighting the necessity of postulating mental systems to process sensory inputs. And this premise led to the application of the scientific method to the study of those mental systems, which in turn led to the origin of modern neuroscience, which was basically the study of the neurobiology of mental systems in humans and other animals. And simultaneously, some researchers applied the scientific method not to the study of the neurobiology of mental systems in humans, but to the reproduction of mental systems in machines. And this is how modern AI originated. So despite this common scientific or scientific historical ground and common terminologies, the ethical reflection around artificial intelligence in neuroscience has largely remained isolated, has been operating in silos. So there are two separate fields of applied ethics that have been concerned with respectively neuroscience and AI. One is neuroethics, which is the field of applied ethics focusing on the ethical implications of neuroscience. And this field of research for decades focused primarily on the ethics of brain interventions, and also on topics such as the ethics of cognitive enhancement drugs and related ethical implications. In contrast, AI ethics has focused primarily on issues such as robot rights, algorithmic explainabilities, fairness of AI algorithms, as well as issues surrounding black box problems, transparency, and accountability. Now, despite this very strong overlap between these two disciplines, as I've been mentioning, these two communities have been primarily operating in silos. And only in recent years, we are experiencing some greater communication and collaboration between neuroethics and AI ethics. However, the point that I would like, or the claim that I would like to make in this presentation is that due to some developments at the interplay between AI and neuroscience, we can no longer afford to have the ethics of neuroscience decoupled from the ethics of AI and vice versa. In contrast, I will argue that we do need a unified ethical framework for the entire brain and AI continuum. And the main trends that I'm referring to, and here I'm referring to work conducted with my previous student, Carolina Ignatiadis, and where we tried to make a taxonomical analysis of the main applications of AI in neuroscience and neuroscience in AI. And we observed that the scientific literature on these topics revolves around four main domains of application. So one is prediction. So AI algorithms, especially supervised learning models, and convolutional neural networks have large application for predicting the onset of neurological and psychiatric disorders from brain data. In particular, we looked at a high prominence of convolutional neural networks approaches for the prediction of the onset of Alzheimer's disease, as well as the use of approaches to supervised learning to predict, for example, the onset of epilepsy from intracranial EEG data. The second domain of application is diagnosis. So besides predicting disease from biomarkers, some AI models are holding potential for early diagnosis of neurological and psychiatric conditions, including Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, ADHD, schizophrenia, and many others. And the third domain is brain modeling. And here is about using AI models, large AI models, to simulate or model brain mechanisms and functions. And this is the primary target goal of the Human Brain Project. So it's a very pertinent topic today. And then finally, AI models have greater and greater application in the development and design of neurotechnologies, especially brain-computer interfaces. And here I think we can quite confidently say that AI is revolutionizing the design and development of BCIs. If we want to cluster these trends in the interplay between neuroscience and AI in a bit more metaphorical way, but hopefully more easy to grasp way, we can say that there are three main socio-technical trends. The first one is what we can call the digital mind, namely the fact that more and more activities and processes of the human mind are becoming inferentially analyzable based on data from digital devices and AI algorithms. The second trend is what we can call artificial mind. So this precisely refers to modeling. So neuromorphic approaches to computing are increasingly able to mimic the functioning of the human or other animal brains in data processing and use, especially with regard to certain cognitive tasks. And the third trend, and here I will spend a little bit more time discussing this third trend, is what we can call the hybrid mind. Namely, the incorporation of AI features in brain-computer interfaces, especially in closed-loop systems, can lead to a greater degree of integration and mutual influence between the cognitive and affective processes of the human individual and AI systems. And all these trends raise quite important ethical implications, and I will try to unpack them today. Let me start with the digital mind. So the digital mind, as I said before, is this increased availability of digital data about human mental functions, and also the increased availability of brain-related information. And this is triggered not only by consumer neurotechnology, which is, of course, the most obvious trend in this domain, but also by other trends such as digital phenotyping, social media, and affective computing, and all those other trends that may not rely directly on brain data, but they may be used to make inferences about mental states. The artificial mind, in contrast, concerns the application of artificial intelligence to the study of neuroscience. And here I really would like to refer to a very nice review by Shimon Ullman in Science, who studied the interaction between AI and neuroscience and observed how this is a bidirectional interaction. On the one end, we are improving our understanding of the human brain through artificial intelligence, but on the other hand, we are simultaneously improving AI through better understanding of the human brain. And finally, I mentioned the hybrid mind, which is at least my colleagues and I, Surya Sukheder, Jennifer Chandler, and Christoph Bublitz, we have described it as a cyber-biological system that involves a two-way, a bidirectional exchange of information between a biological brain and AI, and in which there are processes of mutual adaptation between the human user and the artificial system. And we argue that this dynamic is already characterizing some closed-loop brain-computer interfaces, but I will say more about this in a second. Now, this latter idea of the hybrid mind is technologically new, We think it's enabled only by recent approaches to artificial intelligence in closed-loop brain-computer interfacing. However, the conceptualization of this idea is not new. It actually dates back to the early 1960s, in particular to the work of one of the founding fathers of modern computer science, namely J.C.R. Licklider, who back in 1960 wrote a very prophetic article entitled Man-Computer Symbiosis, in which he argued that in not too many years, human brains and computing machines would be coupled together very tightly, and that the resulting partnership will process data in a way not approached by information handling machine available at that time. And this is becoming increasingly possible through so-called closed-loop brain-computer interfaces. Now, closed-loop systems are automatic control systems in which the operations and processes are regulated by feedback, in the case of BCI, by neurofeedback primarily. And ample research is going on in this domain. And in the second part of my presentation, I will try to emphasize what kind of ethical implications these closed-loop systems raise, especially from the perspective of personal autonomy and the user's sense of agency. So with this in mind, I want to talk about the ethics of all this, and I want to start with an obvious caveat. And the obvious caveat is that we do have a moral duty to reduce the global impact of neurological and psychiatric disorders. Neurological and psychiatric disorders represent a major component of the global burden of disease, and we cannot cure what we cannot measure, and we cannot measure what we cannot process. So we do need algorithms that can allow us to process the increasingly available data that we are obtaining from various types of measurements in neuroscience and beyond, in order to make sense of those data and generate insights that are extremely important for, as we have seen, prediction, diagnostics, assistive technology, and brain modeling. And this raises social responsibilities for each community involved in the process. Now, the social responsibility of science is that of developing increasingly safe and performative and reliable AI-powered neurotechnology and neuro-inspired AI systems. But there is a corresponding task and social responsibility for ethics, which is that of determining under what conditions it is ethical to develop and deploy AI-powered neurotechnology and neuro-inspired AI systems. Now, in the article I mentioned before with Carolina Ignatiadis, we also overviewed the core ethical challenges at the interplay between AI and neuroscience. And today I would like to talk about four main challenges, namely neuroprivacy and mental privacy, the risk of neurodiscrimination, issues of autonomy and agency, and finally, the problem of accountability for AI algorithms. With regard to privacy, I hope you will allow my philosophical pedantry to distinguish two distinct but related privacy problems. The first one is neuroprivacy, and the second one is mental privacy. Now, they're both part of what legal scholars refer to as information privacy, so the privacy of information. However, neuroprivacy concerns the protection of brain data, also called neural data, whereas mental privacy concerns the protection of mental information. Now, when we talk about the privacy of brain and mental information, the obvious historical reference to a long debate in cognitive neuroscience and the philosophy of mind, known as the mind-reading debate. So the idea, according to some, such as John Dillon Haynes, that some approaches to brain data, such as fMRI and pattern recognition models, can lead to the decoding of components, at least, of processes of thinking, visual perception, memories, intentions, and emotions, both from conscious and unconscious states. Now, this big hopes in the 1990s and early 2000s were kind of affected by a process of deflation of the so-called mind reading bubble, caused primarily by the replication crisis, especially in fMRI studies, issues of interpersonal variability, as Marta Farah has very clearly pointed out, but also due to the fact that some neurotechnologies, especially those available in the consumer market, have very poor informational richness. And here I want to refer to the work of Anna Wexler and Peter Rayner. However, AI might be changing the game when it comes to privacy issues. And this is because using AI for brain data recording, for brain data decoding, can actually modify the epistemology of decoding from brain data. In fact, for the classical approach to decoding in neuroscience is what can be called the forward inference. So the manipulation of a specific psychological function to identify localized effects of that manipulation on the brain. For example, we manipulate a specific function such as, say, arithmetic calculus by exposing individuals to perform mathematical operations. And then we look at what happened in their brains while they perform those actions. But AI decoding allows us to do something that is epistemologically reverse, namely what Russell Poldrack has called a reverse inference, which is reasoning backwards from data sets, for example, data sets of neuronal activation, to infer the engagement of specific mental processes. And this is the kind of paradigm that is being used, for example, among others, by Jack Gallant and his team at the University of California, Berkeley, where they proved the possibility of reconstructing patterns, informational patterns from brain activity, both from when it comes to semantic content, as well as with regard to visual information. And if we apply similar models to consumer neurotechnologies in the next decade, we will likely see a greater inferential potential that is fueled by the increasing availability of data. And as we know from big data studies in other domains, greater availability often influences inferential power. But this will also lead to an important ethical issue, which is that of data vulnerability and a greater problem for privacy. And this is particularly true for consumer neurotechnologies, because some previous research, including our work with Pima Salager and Ziki Manuel, has shown that many of these consumer neurotechnologies are using unprotected data sharing channels, and they can be used to draw privacy-sensitive inferences also from seemingly non-sensitive data, such as anonymized EEG data. And this is, of course, happening in the absence of institutional oversight and professional supervision. And AI adds to this the problem of limited traceability, especially for black box algorithms or algorithms that are covered by under proprietary software licenses. So to conclude the part about mental and neuroprivacy, and borrowing some terminology here from Noam Chomsky, I think we could differentiate a mind reading in the narrow sense from a mind reading in the broad sense. And I would argue that decoding the mental content of mental states from brain reading, which is mental privacy in the narrow sense, is still far-fetched. We are not there yet. We are not able to decode the semantic content or the visual content of thoughts using AI. However, we already can reveal privacy-sensitive statistical correlations between certain patterns of data, certain data aggregations, and certain mental states, which is already raising important privacy challenges in this broader sense. I also want to emphasize that neuroprivacy and mental privacy are not entirely reducible to each other. Not all neuroprivacy challenges have to do with mental information, and not all mental privacy challenges have to do with brain data. For example, you can have mental privacy problems without neuroprivacy, such as emotion AI applications, which can use natural language processing, eye tracking, and other models to detect and analyze affective mental states. And in contrast, we can use AI to make inferences about brain data that do not involve mental information. So, for example, when we conduct studies on the neuroimaging biomarkers of certain mental disorders, these models are not ensuring no access whatsoever to mental content, to processes such as thinking or memories. However, they are privacy sensitive. And they're privacy sensitive because they can be used to discriminate individuals or groups. And this is the second ethical challenge that I would like to discuss today, namely the problem of neurodiscrimination, which is precisely this discrimination of individuals and groups based on their brain data. The third problem I would like to discuss today is the problem of accountability and trustworthiness of AI algorithms. And here I'm referring to some recent work with my postdoc, Georg Starke, where we analyzed the use of AI algorithms in clinical neuroscience and in other domains of medicine. And we observed an absence of unanimous and standardized tests for assessing accountability and trustworthiness for these medical AI applications. And we argued that metrics based solely on statistical information and historical data are insufficient and need to be complemented with epistemic evaluations. And epistemic evaluations involve not just the probability of an algorithm to produce an output that is accurate, but also the reason why that algorithm provides that particular output. And this integration of epistemic evaluations in the assessment of AI algorithms used in medicine is particularly difficult when the AI system is integrated into a person's cognitive architecture, as it is in the case in closed-loop brain-computer interfaces. And this problem is particularly tricky when it comes to so-called neuroadaptive systems. So BCIs that automatically adapt to specific aspects of an operator's mindset without explicit input. Because in these cases, there is a risk that the AI features will override the intentionality, volition, and agency of user. And there is some preliminary evidence on this. It's mostly provided by the work of my friend Frédéric Gilbert at the University of Tasmania in Australia. He and his team conducted interviews with 6 patients using closed-loop BCI for epilepsy seizure prediction. And their results show that on the one hand, the BCI can positively increase the sense of self and control, but on the other hand, it can also induce radical distress and even a feeling of rupture of personal identity. However, Frédéric and colleagues rightly emphasize that there is a critical lack of primary studies in this domain on the impact of BCI for agency, and that their own study is limited by a small sample size of only 6 individuals. So to bridge this gap, my colleagues and I, and I've mentioned them before, Surya Sukheder, Jen Chandler, and Chris Bublitz, we are conducting a cross-national mixed method study on the phenotypological and ethical legal dimensions of neural interfaces, which with a special focus on closed-loop systems. And we have conducted so far 33 interviews and questionnaires with various users of BCI and neurostimulation technology, taken from different patient groups, including Parkinson's disease patients using deep brain stimulation, patients with treatment-resistant depression using TMS, as well as users of motor BCI for compensating various types of physical deficits. And we're conducting data in Germany, Switzerland, Italy, and Canada, and using interpretative phenomenological analysis to explore their views on these issues. And here I just want to present some preliminary data from the cohort of DBS users in Italy and Italian-speaking Switzerland. And our results so far show that patients do not experience DBS-induced personality changes. In contrast, they experience that the DBS is restoring some disruption of personality that was induced by the disease. We also observe, however, that some patients report that they experience personality changes when the DBS is off, showing an important constitutive function of the DBS in their self-understanding and in their self-perception. And this is highlighted by the fact that nearly all the patients we interviewed in this cohort perceive the DBS as part of their person. Some even refer to them using personal pronouns. I want to conclude now with some general thoughts about the integration of AI in neurotechnology and the kind of interaction that is desirable to have between brains and machines. And I want to go back to J.C.I. Licklider and his paper on man-computer symbiosis. And I want to reflect a little bit more on the notion of symbiosis, which we are now importing from biology. And in biology, we can distinguish three types of symbiosis. A parasitic one, when an actor lives inside the other, causing harm to it. A commensalistic one, when one actor has a net benefit while the other neither benefits nor is harmed. And finally, the mutualistic symbiosis, when there is an interaction between two or more actors, where each actor has a net benefit. And the argument I would like to make here is that we should ensure that the kind of symbiosis between brains and machines that will occur in the next decade has to be an interaction of the mutualistic type. So one in which each actor has a net benefit. We have to ensure that neuroscience will benefit and the humans at large will benefit from artificial intelligence, but also that artificial intelligence can benefit from our research in neuroscience. And in order to ensure a mutualistic symbiosis between AI and neuroscience, I will argue that there are at least 5 fundamental normative ethical principles that can help us guide this process. The first one is mental privacy and neuroprivacy. So the principle that individuals should have freedom and capacity to conceal their brain data and mental information, and they should be able to prevent non-consenting intrusion of third parties into their neurocognitive domain. And together with a large group of colleagues, of international colleagues, we have recently worked on developing data protection requirements for brain data, focusing on privacy by design and by default via privacy preserving technologies, enhancing users' informational self-determination through affirmative opt-in dynamic consent, and also ensuring the trustworthiness of the data processing models through clear and purpose-specific data management policies. The second principle is the prohibition of neurodiscrimination. And here I want to refer to a very good article by Joanne Paulbrook in the Journal of Law and the Biosciences, where it is argued that we should consider barring the use of neuroinformation in health insurance and employment, which would involve prohibiting group health plans and health insurance providers from denying coverage to a healthy individual, charging that person higher premiums based solely on a predisposition to develop a certain neurological and psychiatric disease in the future. And that might also involve barring employers from using individuals' neuroinformation when making hiring, firing, placement, or promotion decisions, similarly to how we deal with genetic information today. The third principle is cognitive liberty, which can be defined as the freedom of a person to self-determine their cognitive and affective processes. And a possible violation of this principle is the obligatory or mandatory use of neuromonitoring technology in the workplace, as it is already happening in certain high responsibility jobs in China, such as nuclear plants, and high-speed trains, but it also requires scrutinizing more closely the algorithms that are embedded in BCI systems and evaluating those algorithms, not just in terms of effectiveness and safety, but also in terms of the impact on the user's subjective sphere. The fourth principle is mental integrity, which is the prohibition of non-consensual and harmful manipulation of a person's neural activity, for example, through the hacking of neurotechnology devices, a risk that has already been proved by proof of concept studies in the field of cybersecurity. And here I would like to refer to the work of Tamara Bonasi at the University of Washington, which has also already raised concerns at the FDA level. And finally, we should ensure a fair access to technology and a socially justice sharing of the benefits of AI-powered brain-computer interfaces. And this can be done by giving priority to the most disadvantaged, such as neurological and psychiatric patients, elderly people, and people with cognitive impairments, and avoiding the exacerbation of socioeconomic inequality and emergence of a secondary technological divide. And for those who are interested in this topic, I'm reminding to this very interesting Nature outlook on the ethics of brain-computer interfaces. I will finish with saying a few words on current regulatory initiatives, which are now occurring at three main levels of regulatory intervention. The most fundamental, the first, chronologically first approach is that of responsible innovation guidelines for neurotechnology. The second one is data protection requirements for brain data. And the third one, which is also the most foundational from a legal theory perspective, is the human rights frameworks for neurotechnology, the so-called neuro rights framework. Let me start with the first one. So responsible innovation guidelines for AI and neuroscience based technology are proliferating. In particular, the OECD, I think, is doing a great job at working on ethics requirements in parallel for AI systems and neurotechnology. The OECD Council approved in the same year a recommendation on AI and a recommendation on responsible innovation in neurotechnology, which marked the first standard, international standard in the neurotechnology domain. At the level of data protection requirement, there are, to my knowledge, no currently ongoing regulatory intervention. However, there is ample debate in the scientific and ethical community about the applicability of current data protection instruments and to neuroscientific data and to the location of brain and mental data in the current data protection landscape. And with a colleague of mine who is now at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands, Gianclaudio Malgeri, we have analyzed the general data protection regulation of the EU to reflect, to understand whether it offers a sufficiently solid legal basis for mitigating the risks related to mental data processing. And while we think that this is the case, we also encourage interpreters of the GDPR to focus also on processing characteristics and not just on the data category at stake. And we also observe that brain data in certain cases and under certain specific data processing scenarios may require novel impact assessment tools. And we have tried to outline one of such tools, which we have called the mental data protection impact assessment. And finally, at the foundational level of human rights, the so-called neuro rights framework has been advanced by some, including myself, which can be defined as the subset of human rights relating to a person's brain and mental domain. And several regulatory initiatives are taking place, both at the national and international level. At the national level, the Republic of Chile has been pioneering the incorporation of neuro rights into their legislative processes. In the European space, the Council of Europe has launched a strategic action plan on this technology and has produced two reports on this topic, one authored by myself, another one by Shibon O'Sullivan, Hervé Schneeweiss, Alessandro Bierucci, and Karen Rommelfenger. And here I think I would like to emphasize that these reports lead to different conclusions, which I think it's very interesting because it highlights the importance of continuing the open debate on these issues. I also want to mention the UNESCO, in particular, the International Bioethics Committee at UNESCO, and finally, but not least, the United Nations, which last September approved a motion resolution on human rights and neurotechnology. So there is a lot of going on in the regulatory arena. But here, I think we should be mindful that regulating technologies involve some predicting abilities, and prediction in the field of emerging technologies is notoriously difficult. If we look at the recent history of technology, especially in the field of AI, we can see that predictions can be tremendously wrong, both because they are either too optimistic or too pessimistic. An example of the first time is Herbert Simon, Nobel laureate, one of the fathers of modern AI. He predicted in 1956 that machines will be capable within 20 years of doing any work a man can do. And now, more than half a century later, we are far away from having machines that can outperform humans at any task. On the other hand of the spectrum of poor predictions, we have Ernst Rutherford, another Nobel laureate, very brilliant mind, who argued in 1932 that looking for a source of power in the transformation of atoms was talking moonshine. And on the exact same year, the nuclear chain reaction was discovered. So this shows us that we have to deal with predictive uncertainty when it comes to AI and neurotechnology. And therefore, the wisest approach to governance is neither total deregulation nor too hard regulation based on moratoria, but rather what is called an adaptive governance framework, namely a stepwise learning under conditions of a knowledge uncertainty with proactive ethical design, iterative phases of evidence collection, and regulatory evaluation. And with this, I would like to thank my team, current and previous ones, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcello, very much for an incredibly rich presentation. You have covered so many topics, and if we could, we can't, but if we could spend an hour asking questions. So I will limit myself to a few because we don't have a lot of time. So I will take them from the chat. The first question is, do you see any risk that the introduction of AI into the so-called mind-reading field might increase the overinterpretation of data and results that have occurred in the past or previous results?
What does the person who's asking the question mean by overinterpretation?
Let's see, introduction of AI into the so-called mind-reading field might increase the overinterpretation of data.
So I would say, I would definitely think that the use of AI during the processing phase of brain data sets can lead to greater readability and greater informational richness. So that's the argument I was trying to make. And especially because of this possibility of conducting not just forward inferences, but also reverse inferences. So I definitely think that AI can lead to greater readability and greater informational richness. And probably, I presume part of the question is also, can we use these AI models on previously collected data, not just data that we're collecting today or data that we'll collect tomorrow? And the answer is, of course, yes. So data that we have collected in the past, depending on the storage format, are in principle here to stay. So if we have safe storage practices, then we could use AI models to reprocess data that have been collected in the past, which can lead also to the retrospective interpretability of those data. And this can be done for good and for bad, because increased readability is extremely important for prediction and diagnosis. So I think we do need these AI models to better read brain data, but at the same time, we have to avoid some kind of inferences that can be harmful for individual and groups. And I try to make an outline of what these cases could be like.
Now, let me ask another question. As you know, we had a couple of sessions before, and they discussed the issue of interdisciplinarity quite a bit. And to a certain extent, you started your talk by talking about the need for two fields or two applied ethics fields, neuroethics and AI ethics, to work together. and not only work together. You talked about a unified ethical framework or a common ethical framework. So this is a preface to a question here that says, not clear to me what you mean by that. When you talk about a common ethical framework or a unified ethical framework, are you talking about shared methodology, shared basic principles, shared priorities? To clarify this point, the person says it is crucial for a theoretical justification of the mutual connection between AI ethics and neuroethics that goes beyond the fact that they both focus on the same topics. So what would that be? It seems that until we know this, it will be very difficult to implement such unification. So can you expand a little bit on that?
Yes, of course. Well, if we really go back to ancient Greek philosophy and the first reflection on ethics, was quite common sense. Aristotle, among others, was emphasizing this, that the real value of philosophy, and ethics included, is that of providing a bigger picture on seemingly fragmented phenomena. And this has been the case for a good portion of the history of ethics. However, in recent years, the fragmentation and hyper-specialization of disciplines, which was primarily elicited by academic bureaucracy and the way we structure knowledge in academic institutions, has led to this hyper-specialization. However, normative ethical principles can be coherentized and harmonized across different fields of applications of applied ethics. And this is what I was trying to argue for. And the reason why I think this is relevant is that we are experiencing an increasing convergence between AI systems and neuroscience-based systems, neurotechnologies. It will become almost redundant to talk about AI-powered neurotechnology in the next decade, because every neurotechnology, and more broadly, I would say any medical technology, will involve some degree of AI at some level. And if we do not have a well-harmonized ethical framework, we will incur in big complications. So if we have, for example, neuroethical standards for brain implants, for example, and then a different set of ethical standards for AI systems, then the moment we incorporate and embed those AI algorithms in, say, the classification phase of a brain-computer interface, then we could have incoherent ethical norms for the same technology. And I think this is a risk that we need to avoid.
Perfect. Thank you very much. In fact, we have other questions, and unfortunately, we don't have time to ask them. But of course, this is an ongoing conversation. And thank you very much for your work on this, but also for coming here and presenting that work to us. And we know that we've been following you. You know what we're doing, very inspired by all this work. So thank you very much. And thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Marcello, again.